And now to our newsmaker interview with the Vice President of the United States. I spoke with Vice President Biden this afternoon in the Secretary of War suite at the old Executive Office building in Washington. The first subject, the protests in Egypt. Mr. Vice President, welcome.
Good to be with you, Jim.
Has the time come for President Mubarak of Egypt to stand aside?
No, I think the time has come for President Mubarak to begin to move in the direction that to be more responsive to some of the needs of the people out there.
You know President Mubarak.
I know him
Have you
fairly
talked to
well
him about this?
I haven't talked to him in the last 3 days. I haven't talked to him in about a month, but I speak to him fairly regularly. And
the word to describe the leadership of Mubarak in Egypt and also in Tunisia before was dictator. Should Mubarak be seen as a dictator?
Look, Mubarak has been an ally of ours in a number of things that he's been very responsible on relative to geopolitical interest in the region, the Middle East peace efforts, the actions Egypt has taken relative to normalize the relationship with Israel. I think that it would be, I would not refer to him as a dictator. So it's very much, I would argue, in the government's interest, but it's also in the interest of those who are seeking those rights. Again, that's different than some protests that occur in that region of the world that are really designed to overthrow a government for the purpose of establishing an autocracy that is more regressive than anything that exists. It might be argued that what is happening in one country sparks whatever concern there is in another country. It may not be the same concern, it may not be even similar.
The end came in a terse 30-second statement from Egypt's vice president.
President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak has decided to waive the office of the President of the Republic.
In Tahrir Square, there was instant jubilation.
All Egyptians are happy for this news.
This was the moment they'd fought and in some cases died for. The army had watched passively for 18 days as this revolution gathered force. Now it's in charge. It's easy to forget how uncertain things looked just 24 hours ago when the protesters were stunned by the president's announcement that he would not resign. But this morning, they rallied again, emboldened by a week's worth of grudging concessions from Mubarak. By afternoon, the besieged state TV was finally reporting honestly about the protests. It's been chaos here, says this announcer, and we were forced to tell you things we knew weren't true. Soon after state TV surrendered, so had the president. This is, in effect, a military coup, although it's a coup backed by popular will. But the military is giving strong signals that it's committed to some sort of transition to democracy, to representative government. Katie?
Analysts say the prospect that Mohamed Morsi could be Egypt's next president might be unsettling to the U.S. and its allies.
In person, he's quite hostile towards Westerners and consistently says that he wants Egypt to be an Islamic state and has very unpleasant things to say about key American interests, including the treaty with Israel.
Eric Traeger was in Egypt during the Arab Spring and has interviewed Mohamed Morsi. He says Morsi wouldn't rip up Egypt's treaty with Israel, but would take a harder line toward Israel than Mubarak did. Traeger says Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood want to implement Sharia law in Egypt.
The Brotherhood has indicated that they won't force women to wear the veil or the hijab, but what we've seen in Parliament is the Brotherhood is trying to, first of all, roll back the laws against sexual harassment, which they've said is due to women's nakedness, and secondly, they've tried to repeal the ban on female genital mutilation.
Traeger says Morsi and the Brotherhood see that ban as an intervention in the family. a Muslim Brotherhood ally of Morsi's, responded.
Do you yourself believe that? Is there any democracy will allow this to happen? We're totally against this. We've had women's rights in Islam has been there for 1400 years. We're not talking about a new civilization.
Abdul Malgood Dardari says Morsi, who got a PhD in engineering at USC and has 2 children with American citizenship, wants to build bridges with the U.S. But there are questions about some of his allies. In this video clip of one of Morsi's rallies, a cleric named Safwat el-Hegazi calls for a Muslim superstate with Jerusalem as its capital and says Morsi will lead them there. And analysts say Morsi, like other Egyptian leaders before him, has also pledged to work for the release of Omar Abdel Rahman, the so-called blind sheikh, serving a life sentence in the U.S. for plotting the unsuccessful 1993 terrorist attack on the World Trade Center.
You see, we would like to look at it as a legal case. If this man has legal rights, it is his rights, and we're going to support legal rights everywhere in the world.
I asked Traeger a bottom-line question for Westerners about Mohamed Morsi.
Under his leadership, Egypt is the next Iran?
We might not have an Iran per se. We're more likely to have a Pakistan in which a strong military intervenes in a radical political sphere at will.
I put that to Morsi's ally as well. Abdul Malgood Dardari says if Morsi wins, Egypt won't be like Pakistan or Iran.
Dardari says they won't move toward being a theocratic government, that Sharia law isn't scary as many Westerners believe. And he says we shouldn't be listening to people he called Islamophobes who are warning about what Egypt would be like under Mohamed Morsi. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Destroyed. Now, earlier on Tuesday, hundreds of Egyptians marched to the U.S. Embassy in Cairo to protest this film. Many demonstrators were seen scaling the walls to take down the American flag and replace it with a black flag bearing the inscription that means to protest. This is the first time ever that the U.S. Embassy in Egypt has been attacked or breached.
So can you talk about the latest that's happening right now? The beginning in Libya with the killing of the U.S. ambassador, the protests now happening throughout the Arab world. We just heard from what's happening in Yemen, the protests in Sana'a at the U.S. Embassy, and Cairo at the U.S. Embassy.
Look, it's very, very difficult and very sensitive times for many reasons, because just, we were celebrating, or at least remembering, 11 years after September 11 in the country here. And what happened is, as you are referring, there are 2 scenarios. One is to say what happened in Libya was not, in fact, first connected to the movie, but connected to the killing of Abu Yahya al-Libi in June. And this was planned.
Explain who he was.
He was one of the leaders of Al-Qaeda, and he was killed in June. And the point was that people were saying there will be retaliation, and they choose the very same date of the September 11th. So it might be that this connection was in fact used with the symbol at the same time where we were remembering what happened in the States. Add to this that what we have here is very much people who are behind the movie, and it's very important to check who is behind the movie. What do they want exactly? They were using exactly the same symbol 11 years later, just before the election, to put the president also, Barack Obama, and the United States onto something which is a psychological pressure by releasing this and hoping that there will be reactions. It's a provocation. And I think that here we have something which is very important for us, is first to condemn what happened, the killing of the ambassador, and what is happening in the embassies around in the Muslim majority countries, to start with this, but also to understand that there are people from behind the scene who are playing on symbols, emotional politics, and pushing towards something which is a clash. And this is important because you were talking about Mohamed Morsi and people, the Islamists in Muslim majority countries. There is something which is going to be one of the main challenges in the Muslim world today, in the Muslim majority countries and the Arab world, is the religious credibility. How are you going to react to what is said about Islam? So by touching the prophet of Islam, the reaction should be, who is going to be the guardian? And you can see today the Muslim Brotherhood are in a situation where the Salafists and the literalists are pushing, and they were in Libya, they were in Egypt, they are now in Yemen. So everywhere the Salafi are pushing by saying we are the guardian and we are resisting any kind of relationship to the West or provocation coming from the West. And internally, it's unsettling the whole situation. Now, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Syria, in Egypt, the clash between the literalists and the Islamists or the reformists is something which is going to be part of what we have to deal with as to the future of this country.
But interestingly, in this in the incidents in Libya yesterday, there appear to be now, as some reports are coming out, two very separate incidents that occurred. There was a mass protest that occurred early in the evening in response to the film, and then there was a much more coordinated military attack that occurred later in the night on the consulate itself. And apparently the attackers may have known that the ambassador was in Benghazi when he normally was not in Benghazi. So this clearly seems to have been more of a, some would call it a blowback on the United States government for its support, its military support of all kinds of fighters in Libya against Gaddafi, including Islamic extremists.
Yes, I think that this is a very fair point. You know, even after the whole democratization process, it's quite clear that the United States are not seen in positive way in all the Muslim majority countries, in Egypt, in Libya, even in Tunisia, even though we have now a kind of trying to be recognized as democrats by the Islamists who are running, you know, Tunisia and Egypt. But the popular sentiment is very, very negative. So what happened in Libya is clearly connected to the role of the United States when it comes to dealing with terrorists, dealing with the factions in Libya. This is something which is there, and it's clearly a bad perception, a negative perception. The point is how this is going to evolve when people are trying to deal with emotions and pushing towards this. So this is where the Islamic reference in such a way is going to be on two fronts. This was not done for the sake of you know, the democratization in Libya. It's quite clear now that all the economic interest and the access to resources is secured between four countries. The first one is the United States of America, France, Britain, and Qatar, who are also involved in the whole thing. So we need to be less naive in the whole process and to deal with the situation country per country, and understanding that there are challenges, there are from behind the scene alliances that are now important. There is something that I want to say here. All this discussion about the Islamists, and I'm studying it in the book, you know, we have to deal with the Islamists on the ground to see what they are going to do. Remember 10 years ago what was said about Erdogan? He's going to change the country into an Islamist country, a new Iran. It's not going to happen. The Turkish leader. So now we have to deal with them and see what they are going to do. But there is one point which is clear. The United States of America or the Western countries, they don't have a problem with Islamists as long as they are neoliberal capitalists and promoting the economic order. And the best example is the petromonarchies. The petromonarchies, they don't want democracy. They say there is no democracy in Islam, but they are within the economic system. So the question...
Who are the petromonarchies?
The petromonarchies is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, even Bahrain. Bahrain, we had protests in Bahrain, and they were tortured and repression. We don't cover this. We didn't cover this, and no one was saying that the government, it was translated into Shia-Sunni clashes. It's wrong. There is clearly a lack of democracy there, and we need to come with something which is, don't tell us that Islam in itself is a problem, is exactly what Barack Obama just said yesterday. If they are with us protecting our interest, we will deal with them. If not, we will struggle. Which will be very important for the United States, but also for the European countries, is the new actors. What I'm saying here is the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China, Turkey, South Africa, Indonesia even, and Russia are now new actors. Over the last 8 years, China multiplied by 7 its economic presence and penetration in the Middle East.